What's up, everybody? That was an abrupt transition I wasn't prepared for. How's it going, everyone? Welcome back into the stream. It is Monday. We're indulging in a little bit of mayhem today, and I want to talk a little bit today about Team 40K. It was kind of a light weekend this weekend for sort of competitive 1v1 40K, largely because in the United States anyway, which is where I get a lot of my data, that we had the holiday weekend. So a lot of people were with their families and stuff like that. However, we did have some pretty big team events go down, and we're going to talk about some of those results. And yeah, that's what's going on. I'm still sort of out and about. I'm at my parents' house right now because I'm going to be commuting from here down to Everwinter this weekend. So that's going to be in Boston, a 100-player major, and I will be live streaming all 7 rounds of that Friday through Sunday. So that's going to be exciting. I do have the day 1 event up on YouTube if you are interested in that. I'm going to be heading down later this week in order to set that up. But please come join me for the coverage over there. But that does mean I'm still on my laptop today live streaming, so might be a little bit funkier coverage than we normally get, but we'll make our way through, I suppose. So here's what I want to talk about today. So we had a couple of sort of these big team events that are on the larger side. The Leipzig major had 162 players, 32 teams, and an almost identical size was the Catalunya major, which was another 168 player, 28 play team event. Now, those 2 events had kind of standard finishes. What we're expecting right now when we're talking about the team metagame is some combination of some of the goats of the meta, that basically being Space Marines and Eldari, I think are largely going to be the top 2. Adeptus Mechanicus thrown in there a little bit. And then oftentimes we'll see another kind of well-rounded army that can get good matchups into specific opponents, and if you can dodge their bad matchups, they do well. Things like Emperor's Children fit really well into that. Some of the uppy downy style matchups, Chaos Demons, Grey Knights, stuff like that, are also very popular. So what these 2 events do have kind of a standard loadout that I would expect to see. And we'll talk about what that looks like right now. Zugzwang was the winner of the Leipzig team major. This was a 5-player event. So the armies are, or the teams are, I think, kind of just trying to score big wins. They aren't necessarily quite as invested in playing a very complex pairing process, but a lot of the things that we're seeing in this one, definitely, I think are very standard for what I would expect to see. So we have World Eaters here. Jakub Jansa running a Berzerker Warband, Karn, Invocatus, Juggernaut Lord, double Slaughterbound, and then a bunch of 8-bound. And I think that's sort of the vibe that World Eaters have been giving off in recent times. We do have double Forge Fiends, so it's a little bit more well-rounded than we would see out of like a Berzerker spam list or a list that's running only nothing but 8-bound all day long. However, we do have 1 big 20-man of Khorne Berzerkers for, I guess, honestly, that might be just for Lord Invocatus to hop into, to be perfectly honest. These guys are very powerful, given the fact that they get Deep Strike, thanks to, it's a Lord of Juggernaut to make the move in 10. Lord Invocatus, I guess he can hop into an 8-bound unit and then Deep Strike the 8-bound unit is probably what's happening. And then the Juggernaut Lord makes the unit faster. So we can push him up the table a little bit more easily. Karn, I think, can operate by himself. He doesn't necessarily 100% need his leadership ability, although he might be in the big unit. And then we have the Juggernaut characters for this Slaughterbound. I'm actually not 100% sure. But the mobility improvements from the Juggernaut Lords are so crazy on the Khorne Berzerkers because being able to get the whole unit into engagement is a big deal. That said, obviously, losing the rerolls on 20 guys is huge too for this one as well. But mostly sort of regular Berserker Warband stuff. We do have some Chaos Knights here. Louis Steinmerling running Infernal Lance. I'm going to just fall asleep every time I talk about what these Chaos Knights list. It's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate place for Knights to sit. This always happens with Knights and Chaos Knights. where their their armies are so banal that very quickly after release of their codexes, they just immediately revert to being a monolist faction. And Chaos Knights are very much in that. It's an Infernal Ants, it's triple Galley Cannon Despoilers. This one's running War Dogs. It's kind of cool, but usually we see like Rodagus or some Chaos Demons in there. Like 3 War Dogs plus some Chaos Demons or 4 War Dogs, something like that. Yeah, I don't know. The Despoiler Galley Cannon are incredible. Not much else to say about that in particular, especially if we have control of the terrain that this list will get access to. So you can find terrain that's either relatively wide open or has good access to towering areas where towering knights can get over intervening terrain features and then get good lines of like sort of arcs of sight across the table. This list gets absolutely disgusting. If your opponent has good terrain on their side of the table and can stage effectively, there is counterplay to the Despoiler Gatling Cannon Knights, but in this case, obviously, if you are giving yourself Defender in that case to pull out other matchups and then choose your own terrain set, that can be very dangerous. We have some Drukhari. This is interesting. It's Reaper's Wager over here with only Lilith Hesperax. Oh, this is we're just going to score points with this list. This list is crazy, actually. I imagine that this comes in a lot of times to just basically 10 out your opponent, because Drukhari, generally speaking, are going to be pretty good at that. They have so much transport play. I guess we're not doing that much transport play, but they have so many powerful utility units, right? Multiple Reaver units. There are Talos for the late game, but we have Scourges, which can double as a not terrible utility unit all by themselves. Mandrakes, mass units of super fast Hellions, super fast Reavers everywhere, so your scoring capacity is incredible. And then we do have some actual punching power from the Talos in the backline here. Plus the Hellions as well. Getting reroll once they hit on those guys is pretty nice. And then they come in, obviously, with their bonus strength and attacks with empowerment and then lance. So they can act as like kind of a late game punching unit. What we don't have is any incubi or any other sort of melee threats. But I think the idea is to put this into matchups where they don't necessarily need to have an immediate answer to like a big pressure list, something that's going to really put a lot of pressure on the mass multiple small units that you're running. And then you can feed out your smaller units, like your 5-man Hellion units or your Reavers, in order to movement block into screen. That lets you push up the table with the Talos. You have Void Weavers that can hold down the back line with the 18-inch lone operatives, so they can screen and they can hold objectives without having to be attacked. And you just save like Lilith's unit and the big Hellion brick for when you need to answer a problem. And then for the rest of the game, you just basically pick at people with Scourges who then score 1,000,000 points. This is actually wild. So that one's that's a little spicy. I kind of like that. I think a lot of times this will probably get pretty close to just 10-10ing your opponent. Especially if you're doing things like holding up rapid ingresses to steal objectives away. You're doing things like movement blocking enemies from getting to your objectives, and then you can hold them down with the Void Weavers. So you can just sort of score very consistently, even if your damage output isn't the craziest thing in the world. That's a very defensive style of army. I kind of like that. Niklas Freyrix here running what is basically a regular old Ultramarines Gladius task force. This one, we have Cato Sicarius. So that's the new Sicarius, right? I think I got this wrong in a video recently. Captain Sicarius is the old version, right? And Cato Sicarius is the new version, I believe. Captain Sicarius gives you Scout. Cato Sicarius dual attaches with Marnius Calgar. So he can go into a Victrix Honor Guard unit alongside Calgar. So we are running the double Victrix Honor Guard. Oh, shit. No, just kidding. It's triple. We're all in, boys. It's all Victrix Honor Guard all the time these days. That's interesting. We have one Chapter Ancient and one Chapter Champion in different units. We're not dual attaching both of the Epic Hero versions for these guys, and then one just unit a standard unit. I think that's probably to sort of balance out the damage output between these units, because one of these guys is going to get Cato, one of these guys is going to get Calgar, one of these guys is going to get Uriel Ventress. you probably, I don't know exactly where your attachments would be. I imagine the +1 attack once per game from the banner is pretty good on Kato because he has a very high efficiency or a very high output weapon, right? The Tempest Blade swings for 3 damage, devastating if he uses his big overhand swing profile with it. So getting the bonus attack on that's a 20% damage increase, which is pretty impressive. And then Uriel Ventress needs some help on his attack volume. He's fine at melee, but he's not particularly good. Marnius Calgar doesn't really need the assistance, so we don't need any additional attachments from the epic heroes in the Victrix Honor Guard unit, so he can be in the naked unit, and then we can kind of balance out our output on the other two. I don't know if that's 100% what the thinking is there, but I imagine that it is. But that gives us basically just triple Victrix Honor Guard to run across the table, triple Ballistus Dreadnoughts. It is in Gladius Task Force, triple Dreadnoughts, 2 Redemptors, 1 Ballistus. So we have some backline shooting that is irrespective of Oaths of Moment. It's important to note we only get Oaths of Moment once per round in this list. We don't have Robute Gilliman in it for the double Oath. And then we have the double Redemptor Dreadnought to be really resilient. So we can lead with the Redemptor Dreadnoughts, use Devastator Doctrine to get them shots on target and to get them up the table early, and then counterattack with the Victrix Honor Guard and basically just try to bullet your opponent into oblivion. I'm interested as well to see whether or not what you end up actually deep striking in the triple Honor Guard list with Uriel Ventress. It could just be himself to do the command point attacks, which I guess it would be because you do have potential reactive moves on both other Victrix Honor Guard units, right, as they're standing on the table. So you can reactive move them back into the protective sort of bubble of a the threatened heroic intervention and or command point regen if you just drop in Uriel Ventress behind them. And not a lot of units or not a lot of armies are going to deal with 18 Victrix, right, pounding across the table at you that have all of this movement shenanigans available to them. But you could also the Kato Sicarius data sheet also gives you heroic intervention for free. So you could also set up a situation where you can ingress into an intervention super efficiently. So I don't know. I guess there's an interesting case to be made for both. Although having the free reactive move on the table is always pretty nice. And you can even reactive move yourself into a position where you can then get your heroic intervention. So it seems sweet. Captain is old, Kato is new. Yeah. That one's confusing me because I'm so used to characters. I guess it's like old naming conventions from like War Machine when they used to do this with characters that would level up basically and get a new unit, get a new version. Is they would go up in rank a lot of times. So they would go from like captain to general or whatever. And so Sicarius going from captain down to just the man. It's has like kind of thrown me for a loop here. And so I think I just assumed that captain was the superior officer, but instead version 2 is actually just regular Kato Sicarius. I do like it though. It seems to me like the writing's on the wall that these characters are gonna get the old versions of these characters are going to get removed. I do like having multiple versions of a character available because it lets you do cool things. I don't think they did this in this case, to be fair. Kato Sicarius and Captain Sicarius are like almost the same unit, but one of them is like a little tweaked a little differently. But it lets you construct epic hero profiles that, first of all, are thematically cool because you get to see the evolution of a character, right, through their lore, but also you can set up a character a data sheet to where, because it's exclusive with its future version, you can do cool things that would normally be too powerfully synergistic, but you can develop them in different directions because there's no way they could ever interact in the same army because they have the same character keyword. And I think that's really cool and fun. And it upsets me a little bit that 40K doesn't do it. Now, I know, to be fair, it would be in every Space Marine army forever if they did that, because it seems like Space Marine characters are the only people who get character development in the lore. But it would be cool to do it in other factions as well, not just Space Marines. And for a brief shining moment here, we do have we do have it a little bit with the two Sicarius versions, and to some extent the two Calgar versions, but you just never take the Terminator one because it's not as good. But I don't know. You could have like a Uriel Ventress version that's like, I don't know, that's like at different points in his book series, right, where he's like doing different stuff, and you could have that mechanically represented in different ways. You know, right now he's like he is the command point tax thing, but you could have another one that has like free wrap raingrass or something. And putting those two things together would be really, really strong, but obviously he's not going to be able to do that because he would be two different versions. So anyway, interesting stuff. We'll be sad if Gravgar goes to 11th, Legends in 11th. Yeah, it seems like it's coming. I was actually looking on the Games Workshop store earlier today, and I looked up Calgar because I needed a picture for the thumbnail, and the only one is Armor of Antilochus Calgar. It seems that Gravis Calgar has maybe gone the way of the dodo. I'm not sure. If we look up Victrix, do we only get that one? Because it was Marnius Calgar and the Victrix Honor Guard, right? Was the other version? Yeah. And so we just have the new Victrix kit. So I don't know. It seems to me, chat, that the old Calgar might be getting the axe next edition. We'll be sad. Cato is his rank. His name is Sicarius. He's been promoted from captain to Cato. It's actually a deep lore cut. If only I knew. We're going to talk quite a bit about Ultramarines tomorrow. I think, like I said I don't know if I talked about this issue, but what I'd like to do, is tomorrow is go through the matchup records of Ultramarines and talk about what is consistently beating them. So from a analytical standpoint. So what we're going to do is actually dive into some matchups that have been recorded and talk about exactly what's happening and the unit combinations that are beating them, so that we can try to construct an answer for this archetype, because it is, in fairness, incredibly strong. And I think the people who are regardless of how you think about Ultramarines and what you think about their total win rate and all that stuff, I think it's very apparent that the triple Victrix Honor Guard list is very good and does require some answering from the rest of the metagame. So anyway, let's talk about the last list in this one. This one is Niklas Frieschen. Don't get them confused. It's two separate Niklases, who is playing Scintillating Legion, which is actually wild. This is cool. This is another kind of a very scoring focused army. So we have kind of hammer blow armies in the Chaos Knights, the World Eaters, and the Space Marines. Drukhari and this demon list do feel like they are maybe defenders, because they can typically score a very high baseline of points. So you can put those armies forward first, and you can be sure that you're going to score at least 7 or 8 differential points, even if you lose the game. Now, in this case, we're playing Kairos Fate Weaver. We've got a Lord of Change with Infernal Puppeteer, and we have a Neverblade Demon Prince. So he actually hits like a truck. We talked about him previously. He's the Winged Demon Prince. He has, if I remember correctly, he has a once per game for +3 attacks. And then... so he's a once per game with for +3 attacks. He has sustained hits 1. You could use your flux tokens to reroll his hit rolls, and then the Neverblade is plus strength, attack, and damage, I believe. So he goes to 10 base melee attacks. 11 melee attacks with sustained hits and with rerolls from the detachment ability. So if you are looking for a Winged Demon Prince in Chaos Demons in specific, this is probably the best one. Or at least one of the best ones. I think there's a couple Khorne ones that you could potentially build around, but this is certainly one of the best ones, which is pretty cool. I don't know. Get a good Tzeentch character, good melee Tzeentch character, pretty wild. We have a Changeling for just a lone operative, so he can hang out on an objective and be very difficult to interact with. Triple Flux Masters, so we have -1 to hit on, I guess only one of them is going to go into a pink horror squad. We do have a Plague Bearer unit just to hold down the back line. They're just very consistent. They can obsec your back objective, and then once your opponent doesn't have any stuff that can deep strike back there, you can move the Plague Bearers forward. They get +1 to charge. They can't uppy downy in this detachment because you don't have anything that targets non-Tzeentch demons. However, they can just move forward and then charge to the center objective on like Battle Round 4, Battle Round 5. to secure you the win towards the late game. We do have the Pink Horrors with the attached Fluxmaster. They get -1 to be hit, and then we can use what's it called? Flickering Reality to pull them. Oh no, excuse me. Delirium Unmade is the one to pull them out of engagement range and then redeploy them. So with Fluxmasters, everything has Deep Strike naturally because it's Chaos Demons. So with Fluxmasters, we have smaller units that are able to drop into our opponent's backline. We have one big tanky unit of Pink Horrors that's going to be difficult to kill, and even if you engage it, they can pull out and then jump in the front. You can ensure that you have the capacity to screen those by putting Nurglings across the midboard of the table, movement blocking your opponent, or screening out their infiltrators, and then you can sort of dominate that midboard with Screamers as well, that are just very difficult to kill. So again, extremely scoring heavy. I mean, we do have some shooting from the Lords of Change. We have a little bit of melee from the Winged Demon Prince. He can Rampant Ingress and go punch somebody pretty good. But the other thing too is that we're just going to have so many little units jumping around. You can't engage them to prevent them from uppy downeying. They're always going to be able to do it. So they're always going to be able to hop in and out of areas of the battlefield to score secondary objectives. The Fluxmasters as well have a little an interesting little ranged attack because they have a like an Infernal Master style ability. Once per battle round, you can turn a hit, wound, or saving throw into a 6 for them. They have a 3-shot devastating wound gun. So a lot of times what they can do is pop in, shoot you 3 times, burn some flux tokens to reroll. So they likely, it's not like crazy likely, but it's not unreasonable. You get 1 natural 6 on your reroll. You flip another wound to a 6. You deal your opponent 2d3 mortal wounds, and then you do that 3 times. So these guys all together is good for like 12 mortals if you have the capacity to pay for it all. But they all just get those abilities. They all get that ability independently of each other, so they can all use it to flip for at least an automatic D3 mortals. There is a serious chance that you roll an additional 6 naturally, especially if you're rerolling your wound rolls with flux tokens, which can get you some additional mortals too. So they can actually put out some serious damage. People get surprised by those guys, but they're actually kind of sweet. They don't see a ton of play. The downside is they don't do anything else if they're not leading a unit, just being a 60-point deep striker, which isn't bad because they could go do actions and stuff, but it's like a bit of an odd points value for a unit. They're also on a 60 mil base, I think, because they're on a big plinth, a big disc of Zinch. So they're not the easiest thing to deep strike in. You could take like a sloppy bile pipe or something if you just wanted to drop a guy next to your opponent in order to do actions to make it legitimately hard to screen. But the Fluxmaster is more expensive and bigger. However, he does have this cool combat effect, which is neat. I think you'd see a lot more play if his ability wasn't a leadership ability. If he was naturally -1 to hit, and he would actually be kind of annoying to kill because he's a 4+ invuln save with an auto 6 and a -1 to hit for 60 points, you'd actually probably see him play quite a bit. But in this attachment, it seems pretty good. Big Victrix just needs to not be a discount. Yeah, I mean, we can't prognosticate on changes. I do think that they're almost certainly a little too cheap right now. 250 seems fine, right? You're looking at like what are you at? You're at currently they're 35 points a model, 250, you go up 40 points, so what, 7 points per model? So they go up to 42. That should be totally fine, I think, for sure. I think that there's a lot of stuff they could do to change them. It's kind of weird they're spammable, to be fair. Like they're not going to do it now, but you could have just made the whole unit Epic Hero. Because it does feel conceptually weird that you're just able to spam out the most elite bodyguards in the Ultramarines chapter. That's I don't know, conceptually a little bit funny. 6 Flawless Blades is 220. Yeah, eat your heart out, Flawless Blades. But Flawless Blades have to be not very good. That's just, I don't make the rules. That's just what Games Workshop's decided. All right, chat. let's talk about another sort of relatively standard loadout for a list before we get onto, or a team loadout before we go on to our final one. The GT Catalunya was won by Red Ribbon Kraken over here. This was a 6-player team event, so we get extra players out of it. And they were running, again, kind of some standard stuff we would expect. They did have Space Marines. This one's a Shadowmark Talon, so a little bit more flexible than the Victrix Honor Guard build. It's not going to be quite as big of a stat check, but you do get up-downs and sort of annoying stuff. This one's, interestingly, including a Judiciary unit in a Bladeguard Veteran squad. We don't gain Deep Strike or anything in this detachment, right? Like Into the Shadows just comes off the table edge. So that's curious. That's curious. Yeah, I believe that outside of the Ultramarine build, there's no way to get these guys out of not just coming off the table edge. But I wonder. Here's my. Oh, they have the Blackwing Shroud. Does that give? Oh, that gives forward deploy, right? Yeah, you get Infiltrate. Yeah, that's the reskinned Blade Driven Deep. So we have the Hunter's Instincts guy. We have an infiltrating unit of Bladeguard veterans. So they could go behind a sort of midboard terrain feature. They're not really fast and stuff, but they can just be annoying to deal with because they're fight first. The other thing you can do these guys with as well is if your opponent threatens the Centurion Devastators, because in getting these guys engaged is the end of the world, because then they can't pull out a melee, they can't fall back and shoot, they're not vehicles, so they get stuck. It's actually just terrible. But they have to strategic reserve all the time. You could create a situation where if your opponent tries to commit back into them with melee attacks, you could actually just uppy downy the Judiciaries unit and then rapid ingress them next to the Centurions in order to then heroic intervene, fight first, and clear the Centurions off. I think that could potentially be a play pattern, because if the Centurions get engaged, it's so bad. Right? It's so bad for the Raven Guard player. It might literally be a game ending. Now, to be fair, as the Raven Guard player, your goal is not to allow that to happen. But I think that's a potential piece of technology we could be using. The other thing, too, is that we're going to kind of take over the middle of the table with Vanguard veterans, and having a unit that's already starting in the middle of the table around where the Vanguard veterans want to heroic intervention does, I guess, give you a lot of defense against melee counterpunch. So, for example, if turn one where we have the Bladeguard in the center of the table, we rapid ingress in the Hunter's Instincts captain. They push up 12 inches forward, so probably 7 or 8 inches ahead of where the Bladeguard veterans are. Shoot, charge something. The Bladeguard veterans run up behind them. Your opponent comes back in to charge the Vanguard veterans, and you heroic intervene with the Bladeguard veterans. That might also be the reason that we're taking that unit, just to try to be able to protect those guys from like sort of melee enemies. That's a very interesting inclusion, though. I haven't seen that one before. Cave Shrike, the Coronal Susurrant guy, Intercessor Squad, double jump pack intercessors, big Inceptor unit with bolters. That's for the Strike from the Shadows, whatever it's called, the new version, Stunning Fusillade, excuse me, in Raven Guard, for +1 AP, and then you can just fire at your Oath of Moment target, get +1 to wound, full hit and wound rerolls, and hopefully just blast out your opponent. You can then fish for sustained hits as well, so it's a dramatic improvement on the actual damage output of the Inceptor Squad when you're able to full reroll everything and hit on 2s anyway. Your expected result from a single reroll is greater than 1, so you are incentivized to reroll all of your hits on that Inceptor Squad once they get that +1 ballistic skill. I guess also that could mean that the army can work as a counter to melee armies too. It might be a team concession. Having the Bladeguard veteran in that Space Marine list means that if your opponent is playing really aggressive melee units, you can just have this fight first unit that just stands in the middle of the table and bulwarks against any of that like aggressive play, which also, I guess that would be something that could potentially be problematic for Raven Guard if you're just able to like cover the table and screen out their weird drops and you don't have anything super valuable for them to sink the Centurions into. But you make that difficult if you just have a unit that they can't really profitably interact with in the center. Next up, we have, let's see, Chaos Demons. More Chaos Demons getting played. This one's Shadow Legion. Wonder if it is a bunch of accursed cultists. Yeah, speaking of melee armies that are playing very aggressively, this is all the accursed cultists. So we have 2 Dark Communes, one of them with the 9-inch scout, the other one just normal. Warp Talons to clear some enemy utility. Cultist Mobs for the back line. So we have a ton of these fast infantry that can push really hard across the table. Screamers, which are difficult to kill. You can regenerate them inside Shadow Legion, plus they're -1 to hit. Flesh Hounds for uppy downy naturally. Fiends, just for a little bit of more punching. More forward operators from Beasts and Seekers. And then the Fade Thirster and Bellicor. Yeah, so just very aggressive melee in this list. Death Guard and Virulent Victorium. Kind of Death Guard good stuff, I guess. 1 Lord of Virulence for the rerolls. 1 Lord of Contagion for Death Shroud Terminators. Malignant Plague Caster. And a Putrefier. So we'll have 1 big Plague Marine brick that's going to get the combination of those 2. Demon Prince of Nurgle for free strats. 1 Tallyman for additional CP. And then, man, eat your heart out, Tyranids. That used to be their thing, is they would get both of those. But the Tyranid version costs 500 points. These guys cost 250. Literally half as much. Must be nice. We've got Chaos Spawn, triple Death Shroud Terminators, hot diggity damn, triple Myphitic Blight Haulers. Oh, there's no Fetid Bloat Drones. Interesting. So the Malignant Plague Caster, I guess, is only giving rerolls 1s to hit. Because we don't have any blast weapons to utilize those. We do have blight launchers, I suppose, and these guys could fire frag missiles, but they usually don't. For the Lord of Virulence, but he has another good attachment for the Death Shroud Terminators. Like you're never upset about dropping that guy in and getting a bonus on your ranged attacks. The interesting thing, though, is that we don't have a lot of natural ways to deliver the Death Shroud Terminators. A lot of times what these Virulent Victorium lists want to do is have a unit that can hop in and then project their contagion onto something to then unlock the Death Shroud Terminator 6-inch Deep Strike. In this case, I guess it's Poxwalkers, because once you're in Battle Round 2, they go to a 6-inch aura on their contagion. The Poxwalkers can advance. They're move 5, right? So it's like 10 plus D6 is the threat range to get that in. But if your opponent isn't like engaging with you, it could be very difficult to actually get that aura on target. I guess you could 9-inch rapid ingress a Death Shroud Terminator unit to then unlock the unit in front of them to get the drops from multiple Death Shroud Terminators, but it does seem a little bit tough. I guess the Chaos Spawner is another like not terrible option for delivering that. But oftentimes what you'll see is either Plague Spear or Fetid Bloat Drones, which are a little bit faster and can push more aggressively, or you play Mortarion or another deep striking unit who can get the contagion on people to get the Death Shroud Terminators in. Sometimes, I guess not in Virulent Victoria, but sometimes you'll even see, like in Taliban Summoners, you'll see like Nurgling Swarms that can hop in and do it as well with the 6-inch Deep Strike and expanded, and to expand someone's contagion aura. Not today, though. We have Eldar. It's Eldar stuff. This one is Malganra. That's cool, I guess. Neat. Normal build. Kind of standard. We saw the Space Marines, Emperor's Children, the other inclusion here. Coterie of the Conceited. Triple Demon Prince with Wings. Double Lord Exultant. Lucius the Eternal. Infractors ×2. Tormentors ×2. Flawless Base ×3, let's go! Plus 3 units of Noise Marines. Basically, normal lists is what we're trying to say. But that is not necessarily what we got in the big event that I want to talk about today. That was the 3rd team event of the weekend, and that was Brothers in Arms 2025. Because the eventual winning list, I have a lisp today, apparently, was Full Welsh Breakfast. Good name. And if we take a peek at what they have going on, we can notice some differences, chat. First of all, Eldar, we don't need them. They suck, actually. Victrix Honor Guard, Space Marines? No. Trash. Literal, unplayable garbage. Instead, we are playing such heights of the competitive metagame as Orcs and Drukhari. Let's go. From Brothers in Arms. And that's why I'm excited to talk about this particular list, even the Adeptus Mechanicus list, which would be normally, okay, we're playing AdMech. It's very good. They have Oath of Omen from Call. They get rerolls. They get high damage from their big, scary Las Cannon, Iron Strider Ballistari. This one even has some spicy combos that we wouldn't normally see, which is why I'm so excited about this particular team, because it is a very innovative approach to the team design. So let's go. We'll talk about Adeptus Mechanicus first. We'll talk about the sort of top two here, AdMech and Sisters, which are both high performers right now. Liam Keen playing Halo Scree Battleclade. However, it's a Corpuscarii list, chat. Let's go. My favorite list. My favorite version of Halo Scree Battleclade right now. The Corpuscarii Electro Priest Wombo combo is one of my favorite things in this whole codex. Because I was hoping it would be good when all of this stuff was originally released, and then it just never saw play. However, in this case, we're doing it. So we have Belisarius Call. Grant rerolls to something. We get to reroll all our hits. Great. Tech Priest Manipulus normally gets played with Cataphront Destroyers in this attachment. However, it's a 2-part enhancement. It gives you rerolls on hazardous checks and also plus 6 inches of range. That's huge for Corpuscarii Electro Priest, which only naturally have a 4-inch range, a 12-inch range to begin with. The other thing, too, is that they have a sustained hits effect, sustained hits, too, and the Manipulus gives lethal hits. So you're looking at sustained 2 plus lethal. Halo Scree Battleclade has a 1 CP strat to get 5 up critical hits, and Belisarius Call gives you full hit rerolls. So this unit, I'm going to double check my math here, but I'm pretty sure I have it right. This unit is firing 30. Here's the data sheet, Chance. We're firing 30 electrostatic gauntlet shots. If you're in Conquer Imperative, they get AP1. Let's assume we're in Conquer Imperative, so we hit on 3s, right? And not 2s. Because we have lethal hits plus sustain 2, we reroll everything that's not a 5 up. So in this case, we're firing 30 shots. We should get 10 criticals. We're going to reroll another 20, and we should get about 7 more criticals. That is 14 automatic wounds at AP1, 1 damage. It's not high damage. It's not high P, but it's 14 automatic wounds. And then 28 additional hits because it Tesla's out for sustain 2. We're also then going to naturally hit about another 7 times. Let's assume we're winning on 5s, right? We're shooting T6 or something, shooting Victrix Honor Guard. So we are then, or I guess they would win Victrix Honor Guard on 4s. It doesn't matter. Let's roll out 5s. The 28 hits that we already got are looking at another what is that? Like 9 wounds. So we're handing your opponent 23 saves, plus whatever the Tech Priest does as well, because of the lethal hits. Or excuse me, 24 saves. And that's into a non-perfect profile. If we shoot something that we would on 4s or better, obviously it becomes much better. And if we go to Protector Imperative, so we hit on 2s, then we suddenly improve the number of natural hits we get. If we have a Dune Rider, which we do, we also get wound rerolls on all of those wounds. So that what did we say? We said 17 automatic wounds plus 7 additional wound rolls. Those 7 additional wound rolls becomes closer to like 15. So we're handing your opponent somewhere around 30 plus saves, 33-ish saves on average from that unit. Costs you a command point. It costs you an enhancement plus character. He does give you access to and it costs you a transport as well. But the transport's good. You're going to take the transport anyway. The Manipulus does give you access to a once per game 4+ invulnerable save. You can stack that with stealth on the unit. And they have a Feel No Pain. I don't think it's a good Feel No Pain, but they do have a Feel No Pain. I think it's a 5. Yeah, it's a 5. So they're not the easiest thing or the hardest thing to kill. They're T3, but you can give them minus sort of hit. You can give them a 4+ invuln. So you can make it like actually require some, dedication to actually remove the unit in the crackback. But it's also not the most expensive thing in the world, right? It's 200 points for the unit itself. The Dune Rider is additional, but the Dune Rider is also just a great unit anyway. So I think we would take that guy regardless. You can start Rangers in the Dune Rider and then scout it up the table, disembark the Rangers if you can't get to an objective to begin with, and then refill it with the Corpuscarii if you don't need them that turn, and then they could just run up and go do stuff next turn. So you have a lot of flexibility there. We have Iron Strider Ballistari for anti-tank. Traxi Skystalkers for utility, Cerberus Raiders for forward operation, so they can scout forward and move block people. One big infiltrator squad. They also sustain 2 in melee, so we could use most of the same combos in melee instead of range. Sicarian Infiltrator Squad, triple Sicarian Rust Stalkers for punching people to death. That's 2 units of 10, 1 unit of 5, and then double Scorpius Disintegrators, Ferromite Cannons for anti-tank purposes, plus a Calidus Assassin. So we can even like mess with people's defensive strats when we wombo combo off. And not the craziest damage in the world, I think, especially if you hit. Because they don't have a natural way to ignore cover, I don't believe. If you hit a high armor save enemy or an enemy that's in cover, you're basically just looking to overload their saving throw. But it's probably good for into a 3+ save. It's good for like 12 damage, most likely. If yeah, that's just about it, because they're mostly going to be saving on 3s. Once you get into a 2+ save, it gets really tough to get a lot of work done. But you're hoping to the Iron Strider Ballistari and your other stuff is able to deal with those matchups. But incredibly cool little wombo combo that I always like to see having success, because I think it's neat. I just think it's neat, chat. I don't think it's quite as efficient as just playing more Sicarians, to be fair, because for the price of this unit plus the transport, you could literally have 2 Sicarian units, right? You could have 20 more Sicarian infiltrators. It obviously fulfills a different purpose. It doesn't have to engage in melee. It doesn't have to eat real estate behind buildings in order to do all of its stuff. But just as a comparison, that said, I think the Sicarians may be a little undercosted right now, and I would love to see that combo go down too. It is an incredible bucket of dice. It's just a massive amount of dice. From there, we also have Drukhari running Spectacle of Spite, so we're going to get a lot of a melee damage, or a lot of utility sort of scoring out of this list. We are running Drazar plus Malice, so we do have some pretty spicy melee attacks in here. We have Morgana's Curse, which I think is the plus AP and damage enhancement. Yeah, +1 AP, +1 damage on the Succubus. So Succubus and Lilith both hit pretty hard. We don't have the Chrono Shard though, so we don't get Fight First in this build, but which is unfortunate, because you are trying to threaten the reactive charge that these models have at the end of the opponent's movement phase. So having access to Fight First in the army is huge. Lilith will do it obviously by herself, but the other characters won't necessarily. We have Cabalite Warriors times 10. Witches, 3 units of witches, so 30 total. Venoms for all of those, so we're going to be able to split those into 8 units of 5 plus the Venoms. So in that alone, we have 12 independent units, most of which are OC2 each, right, per model. So they can move up and contest your opponent's objectives really efficiently. Chronos for Pain Token Regeneration. 30 hell, Jesus. This list woke up and chose violence, chat. 30 Hellions just to hit people with sticks. I don't know. 1 Incubi unit, that's for Lady Manalis to hop into, so she can deliver lethal or sustained on the Incubi attacks. And then she also has a good spot to drop her own ability off of, her own command point attacks. We have Mandrakes plus double Scourges, all those Scourges with Dark Lances for some shooting. 30 Hellions, though. That's wild. So we basically have a ton of units that can all range forward and contest objectives and score points very efficiently. If you don't engage with them, they will outscore you, right? If you do engage with them, you're running into reactive charges and a counterattack from Hellions, right? That hit pretty hard. If the Hellions are counterattacking on their own terms, you can get the Chronos in there to regenerate their pain tokens, because they're going to constantly empower. Drazar's a bit of an interesting inclusion too. We could theoretically put Malice into like a Cabalite Warrior squad, but I don't think that's very common. However, Drazar, his +1 to wound is just an empowerment ability, so he doesn't need to attach to anything to basically act as with full effect. So he can just be a little nuke, right? A little nuclear missile, and he can charge in with 8 2 damage devastating attacks with +1 to wound. Downside is if you roll a bunch of ones to hit, that sucks. But on the flip side, he is very good at like clipping out enemy utility units potentially. essentially the only benefit that he brings that isn't an empowerment ability is 6-inch pile and consolidate, which is largely worthless on Incubi. If you could attach into Cabalite Warriors or something that was OC2, you might see that be, different. But he himself is just mostly a missile. All he requires is a pain token to get full effectiveness. So he's just by himself, just hanging out. This is wild. 30 aliens is crazy. I'm actually so curious about how this list did. Well, because it's cool. I like it. He drew with Space Wolves. Round 5, round 4. Close game to Death Guard. Ended up losing a close game to Sisters. Yeah, it feels like a very defender list, I guess. Did win big into Chaos Space Marines round 2. Round 1 got a big win into Chaos Space Marines again. Okay. But to be fair, their team basically swept the first 2 rounds. So I think that was mostly a skill imbalance, it looks like. 97-3. Oh, boy. That is a differential, chat. Hot damn. Armageddon out here. Or Armageddon out of here. That's a good team name. My heart goes out to you, boys, because you got a shark round 1. Holy crap. They mostly got 20-0'd. Disgusting. But it does feel like a lot of times it was basically just playing for these really close games. Which makes a lot of sense, right? We have a lot of high OC units that can range out and take objectives or contest objectives. The Hellions are very aggressive as well. The army's not going to survive. So towards the late game, it's likely to start running out of steam. However, if you can keep your opponent pinned down until that late game, you can keep the score very close. So you can play onto most matchups as long as they don't have like mass indirect fire or something that can clear the Hellions out before they do their work. You can make it happen. I don't know. You get a pretty solid thing. Malice is probably with Warriors. I don't think I've ever seen Malice actually attach to Warriors. I've very much seen Drazar run solo though, because Drazar actually doesn't really do anything for the Incubi, right? Whereas Lady Malice gives them sustained or lethal. All right. Moving back to the roster. We also saw some Tau Empire getting some work done here. Montka, all gas. Let's go. Drazar gives the unit +1, right? But the difference between +1 and Malice's ability is not huge, and Drazar doesn't require a unit to get that bonus, right? So you can give him, he can operate like normally. He can operate separately from the unit. So you can use him to kill stuff that you wouldn't need to dedicate an entire Incubi unit to kill. You might be right, chat, but I have legitimately, I don't think I've seen the Singleton Incubi unit attach Drazar over Lady Malice in the past. Maybe I'm wrong, and that was not how it was being played in this case. But every time I've seen the Singleton Incubi unit, it's been Malice leading, and then Drazar is by himself. So we have in this list an Enforcer commander. So we strike swiftly on the Enforcers. So staying on the battlefield early. Interesting. Exemplar of the Montka. So sustained hits in early game on another Enforcer battlesuit. Plus an Ethereal with Strategic Conqueror. So the +1 OC. A Devilfish, double Fire Knife battlesuit teams. I guess that's for the Enforcer commanders. That's an interesting inclusion. I suppose with Strike Swiftly and access to Assault, you can get around the fact that the Enforcer commanders themselves are not particularly fast, just by the fact that you can scout and then move them around to get lines of sight early. But that is an interesting inclusion. They are a good target for the +1 AP strat that the detachment has, because you can put them to AP2 ignore cover, which suddenly gets them through a lot of other people's armor saves. We have Ghost Kill battlesuits. 1 unit of Crude Carnivores for some early game scouting. Triple Pathfinder teams. It is 2 recon drones, so 2 infiltrators, 1 grab inhibitor to go into a devilfish, I guess, right? Yeah, we do have a devilfish for them to hop into as well. And then 1 Piranha, triple Riptide battlesuit, stealth battlesuits ×2, plus Vespid Stingwings. This is mostly standard stuff, right? I don't think anything's particularly surprising here. Mass Pathfinders is definitely the town metagame right now. We are playing new stealth battlesuits with the 110 point cost. It's hard to fit more than 1 unit into the list anymore, unfortunately, at the new 5 model strength. Oh, excuse me, I have 2. Just kidding. eat my words here. Hard to fit more than 2, I guess, because we're paying almost the same points that we did for 3 previously, but we only get 2 units. However, the inclusion of these Fire Knife teams are really interesting. I think, like, the Montca detachment with missiles is very good. However, and I guess, like, the fact that the Enforcers can keep them alive a little bit longer does help quite a bit, right? Gives them a built-in armor of contempt effect. Oh, excuse me. I think I mentioned Exemplar Montca gives sustain, but it doesn't. It gives lethals for an extra turn. But I guess, like, the benefit is that we can just focus fire for, I guess, lethal hits on a mid strength, right? Ranged attack is good. Plus 1 AP from the coordinated, or for the focus fire strat is good there too. If you're assuming that you're being guided for, so that you can get ignore cover from marker lights, which you almost certainly will be. The downside is like a relative lack of like hypermobility, but the strike swiftly will help that quite a bit. And then you just let loose with full rerolls and try to get some lethal hits with these guys. You're firing in total. You do have a cyclic on these, on the Enforcer Commander, but otherwise, the Fire Knife battle. I guess also you don't necessarily need stealth shoots for these guys because they have baked in rerolls to hit if you're shooting a unit for the first time, so it's still at starting strength. So you're shooting 4 missile pod shots per battlesuit, plus 12 for the Enforcer, right? Oh no, plus 6 for the Enforcer, excuse me. So you're shooting 12 plus 6 is 18, plus a cyclic shot, which does require that you get into 18 inches of your opponent in the early game, which does feel maybe a little bit tough. But if you're assaulting them forward anyway, it's fine. So it's another 3 strength 8 AP 2 damage. So you get 18 strength 7 AP, potentially up to AP 2 damage, ignore cover, right? And then 3 more AP 3 2 damage. So it's 21 2 damage hits with lethals that are re-rolling. So you're probably getting 4 to 5 lethal hits in there. And then even if you're winning on 5s, right, you're most likely going to hit probably the majority of your attacks. You're probably going to wound another 4 or 5 times. So you're probably handing your opponent like 10 AP2 saves. The second unit won't get necessarily the same punch if they coordinate onto a single target, but you could coordinate with a focus fire with a Riptide battlesuit to kill them in the crackback. So if you do that, I guess you can't do that twice. You can only do it one at a time. But the combination of the two, I guess, is likely to kill something pretty big. So the turn 1 sort of engagement with them does feel pretty strong. That's an interesting combo. I don't know if I've seen that. I've definitely seen the Fire Knife teams before, but I don't know if I've necessarily seen that in Montca specifically. The big difference, sometimes we see broadside battlesuits in that capacity, but obviously the Fire Knife teams are much faster and easier to get on target than broadside battlesuits with missiles are. We have Adeptus Sororitas in this one as well, and this is another crazy one. Hey, what's up?
Edriong 6931 donated $5 through Super Chat. The ignore hit mods means they also don't mind charging or being tied up in melee.
Yeah, I guess that's also true. Because Montca doesn't have any way to fall back and shoot, right? That's like kind of a downside of the detachment. unless you have a battlesuit support system. So the Riptides can do it, but everything else gets kind of stuck in. So being able to just fire in melee also, I guess, makes sense. That's cool. Thanks for the super chat, Ryan. Appreciate you, bud. We've got Bringers of Flame, so we're kind of like completing the set of like hyper aggro lists here. We have this like mass aggressive Drukhari. We're playing Mon-Ka Tau Empire, one of the most aggressive Tau Empire build. We're playing this like weird combo Adeptus Mechanicus list, and we're also taking all advance and shoot Bringers of Flame. So everything can kind of just push across your opponent's side of the table and just like screen them out for big wins, which I think is probably some of the arithmetic here. If you are playing hyper aggressive in the WTC format, so you can score big, you can easily knock your opponent out. You get benefits going first because you can close the distance with your opponent very quickly. You can be attacking them turn one if you scout and you push really hard, which is huge in a format where it's going second is usually advantaged. Then you can also potentially prevent them from getting to objectives, and then that gets you the huge score, which is what you're looking for on differentials. And we did see that work out for them because their first two rounds were basically 100-0s, very close to it. So we have Demonofuge, Morph, and Ball, the only two characters, double Immolator plus a Rhino, double Castigators. One is auto cannons, one is battle cannon. So we can sort of start the trade with the battle cannon, pump up the AP for the auto cannon shot without worrying about cover. Double Dominion squads, all of those with melta-guns to go into the Immolators, Paragon warsuits, Retributor squads times 3, Sanctifiers for the Rhino, 2 Sanctifiers, Jesus, plus double Seraphim. The Sanctifiers are too big to fit in the Rhino to dual attaching to the Rhino. So they are just gonna. There's one of them just gonna be ground pounding, just running across the table. Helpfully to take like mid board, terrain features and stuff, which is very nice. And then they can push out next turn. And then Seraphim squads for utility with Inferno pistols, so we can get some good miracle shots off. But the big benefit here, obviously, is that we can combat squad the 4 melta-guns into the Immolator. You can scout the Immolator 6 inches forward, advance it. There's you can auto 60 advance, so you go up to 18 inches. You can pay a CP to disembark after advancing. So you've moved 27 inches between a 6-inch scout, 18-inch move, 3-inch disembark, and then you shoot your melta-guns. So it's almost impossible for your opponent to deny you shooting at them with shooting the Immolators at them from the very beginning of the game.
Atomnipulus donated $5 through Super Chat. Being AWOL from 40k, and mech being top tier in the blink of an eye. Good for the channel Imao, but I feel bad fielding them even though it's my only army.
Omnipulus, thank you for the Super Chat as well. Yeah, definitely understand it. It's very helpful when your faction's good. It feels the same way. I guess to like a less granular extent when like 40k is in a good spot. It definitely it helps this channel out quite a bit because we're a little bit more all rounder over here rather than focusing on a single faction. But yeah, definitely, I'm sure it's been a good time. But I don't know. I think as we talked about a second ago, I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff you can do in Adeptus Mechanicus, where you don't necessarily have to play the stuff that's really crazy good. You can feel bad if you're running like 70 Sicarians and 9 Iron Strider Ballistari, because that list is just like, so a friend of mine just described it as throwing your wallet at your opponent, which does make sense. But if you're playing units like the Corpuscarii Electro Priest, you could play some of the other stuff. You could play Sidonian Dragoons. You can play like Cerberus Sulfur Hounds and things that are like maybe still good but slightly less optimal. And I think it pulls the other players into the game a lot more in a lot bigger way. And so the interesting thing about playing a faction that's strong is your what am I trying to say? Like you have total control over how strong you build your lists, right? A strong faction is good at building into a hyper optimal list. It's very difficult for other factions to beat, but it also means it supports a lot of jank. And that's kind of the coolest thing about playing like top factions in a weird way. You know, like when Tyranids were good at 9th edition, I wasn't playing like, you know, just like Maliceptor bricks and harpies and stuff, but I started playing like Screamer killers and things like that I thought were really like just cool units that were fun. And I think that's an interesting way to approach armies that would otherwise be kind of like degenerately powerful. It's like if you can make that army work, but playing a more interesting list, people will give you much more respect for it. And I think that's an interesting way to approach it. Much as you love infiltrators, don't like spamming Sicarians. 5+ critical is beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, the Sicarian spam does like look really weird when you see it on the table too. And you look at the army and you're like, this is a horde army of like medium infantry. It's not like I'm spamming orc boys, right? Each of these is 2 wounds. It is a bunch of melee attacks. Like, what are we doing? They cost like 15 points each. Pretty weird. I don't know. It's another thing with 40 mil base infantry. I think I've talked about that in the past, where a lot of times like 40 mil base like medium infantry do feel a little out of place because they're very physically large, even if their board presence isn't that crazy. But yeah, so this army, going back to the Sisters army momentarily here, what you typically want to do basically is engage with your opponent super early with the immolators. You want to first of all, you get kind of 2 separate benefits from this style of game plan. One is they have to respect you in deployment, which means oftentimes they deploy farther back than they normally would if they were playing against an army that didn't have that turn 1 alpha strike. That means that if they go first, their first turn is also similarly often not as strong. Because they want to keep their valuable units outside of range to get hit by the immolators, Meltaguns. Because again, with Miracle Dice, anything is possible. If you just immediately go first, bang a 6 on a Miracle Dice, and drop a Meltagun shot for 8 damage into your opponent's most valuable unit, suddenly the game could get turned on its head really quickly. Plus, you're movement blocking them into their deployment zone, and it's difficult to counterattack. Once you get towards the later game, you have all these Retributor squads that will almost certainly be active with their +1 to hit and wounds because you have fed your opponent so many individual units, right? 2 immolators plus 2 combat squads plus potentially 1 to 2 more combat squads. As we talk about the other stuff, the other half of the Dominion units.
Beyond 6,931 donated $10 through Super Chat. I'm not sure if you feel the same, but I feel like Tyranids in 9th and 10th have so many datasheet traps. It's so easy to do negative damage compared to other factions with units you'd think.
It seems like the super chant cut out there. Other factions I think are good. What about negative damage? Like below average damage, like damage that is demonstrably below the curve. I think I would agree with you. Negative damage, I don't know. But I think that the datasheet traps a lot of times in Tyranids, there's a concept I like to call visualized list building, which I'll admit like I'm not as good at anymore because I just play like weird beams and stuff now. But a lot of times what you want to be doing when you're constructing your 40k armies is you want to consider where your models will position on the table in an optimal board state. And you want to assess their ability to interact with the game based on that. And I think Tyranids run into this problem where a lot of units, and this is why I get, I complain about a lot of Tyranid units being like basically unplayable in 10th edition because like of their physical dimensions. That's where a lot of them run into problems, right? As you start to be like, well, like the Haru specs is like mathematically really good, but it's an enormous base on a move 8 monster chassis. So you consider where on the board am I going to place that where it's not going to A, just immediately die, and B, actually be able to make it into melee. And you realize that there's no place for it, right? And it's almost the same for other stuff. Like even strong Tyranid stuff, you talk about like, oh, where's my Norn Emissary go? Where I can make it to an objective early, but I don't immediately die while trying to move 100 mil base around a terrain feature. And you're like, well, in some layouts, there are good spaces for them to stand. But in a lot of layouts, you have to either risk losing a Norn turn 1 or not getting to your singular purpose objective and then basically losing it turn 2 instead. And I think that there's a lot of I guess I would consider those datasheet traps where you think about mathematically and you're like, this should work, right? We think about the math of my stats versus your stats. And I certainly have the capacity to deal with you. I can overload your threats because my monsters are so cheap. I have so many individual melee attacks. But the problem is that the Tyranids have this huge delivery issue where a lot of times they will not be able to actually get those things in range. And it even works for their guns as well. Things like Pyrovores, for example, is like a great example. It's just this thing with an enormous base that will almost never get to shoot because it can't move around terrain features very well because it has to constantly be advancing, which means you always need your like Hive Tyrant to be able to get in range of that guy. I don't know. It's just poorly constructed army. Unless you're playing the Horde mode stuff, like the Horde mode Turbo God stuff, I think is not too bad. But if you want to play the any of the other archetypes in the faction, it's not that great. A lot of new players got turned off 40k because of how hard to use it correctly their units. Yeah, I will say as well, the Tyranid like starter set is like really bad. In fairness, the starter, like if you look at the 2-player starter set for 40k, to be fair. And this is a crazy thing. Warhammer Games Workshop uses the starter sets as it's so dumb. They use them as nowadays, anyway, since 8th edition, basically, they delivery systems for new models, right? But they aren't good introductions to the game. So, like the Tyranid one is like Von Ryan's Leapers, Termagants, and a Tyranid Prime versus fucking Terminators and Infernus Marines. What are you supposed to do with that? Like, what am I doing with this? None of this army has any chance to kill a Terminator. Why is my opponent get Terminators? I don't even get like melee warriors or something like that. So like the two starter sets are not very balanced against each other. And as a new player hopping into the game who doesn't know anything about the codexes and anything about like all of the tactics involved, and I play that matchup and my opponent just like rapid ingresses 5 Terminators with a captain and just like smokes my whole army, I gotta be like, this is stupid. Why the fuck am I here? I would never play that game again. It's wild they don't more accurately balance starter set content against each other. It's crazy. It just feels like, to some extent they can sort of like ride off the fact that they're this huge already sort of established IP and people are going to be interested in joining regardless of their first game experience. But man, if they were a lesser game, right? If they were even number 2 spot in the industry, that starter set would be a travesty and they would never get any new players. Wild. Absolutely wild. Ooh. Tyranids not getting new good units to drop. Yeah. I mean, in fairness, neither did Space Marines. But the Ballistic Dreadnought was cracked and everything else that they re-released was fucking trash. Terminators have been bad until Emperor's Shield, and even then, they're not that good. It's a whole thing, chance. But yeah, it's unfortunate that Tyranids are commonly a new player product because, at least in this case, they're very like weird and to play. You just have to forget killing your opponent's units and just like embrace the score every point forever. Maybe 11th edition they'll fix the faction. Bring back my Xenomorph from Aliens Tyranids where they're fast and scary but are easy to kill. That's what I want back. So yeah, I think we can close out discussion of the Adeptus Sororitas list here. Just wanted to say that obviously you have like kind of a layered level of threat from these things. You have the immolators with the Dominion squads. Your opponent has to null deploy to prevent them from getting stuck in. Then you get to hit them turn 1. You lose some units, empower your Retributor squads, come in with the second wave, whether that is Morven Vol or another immolator or Sanctifiers. You can continue to do that, push your opponent back, and then continuously sort of dominate the middle of the table. And again, empower your Retributor squads. Late game, you have the Retributors, and you have Morven Vol to come in and do some really serious damage. Obviously, this is a classic version of Sororitas. It's kind of been eclipsed by Champions of Faith, but especially in this team where apparently everyone's just like literally putting pedal to the metal and just running directly across the table to their opponent. It definitely makes sense, I guess. And then last but certainly not least, we have Orcs chats. Tom Green over here playing Orcs with a Warhorde. To be fair, it is mostly a regular Warhorde list, but it's always good to see Orcs doing well. And again, more aggro board control play from this Welsh breakfast team. They have no chill, these people. We have Boss Snickrot, Ghazghkull, Thraka, 1 Beast Boss, 1 Big Mech with, follow me lads, 2 regular War Bosses, a big 20 mana boys for Ghazghkull, Thraka. We dual attach with the Big Mech. The Big Mech gives plus movement. We could use Here We Go for the extra movement as well. And then Ghazghkull, Thraka. We use that to slingshot Ghazghkull, Thraka into something scary on your Wog turn. You get a big Wog turn. The unit is relatively tanky with 20 wounds and a 5+ feel no pain. You'll probably lose it, but you'll lose it down to Gaz. You get another round of swinging from Gaz. And hopefully that's enough to break your opponent's back. A lot of times it's not, and that's the downside of Orcs right now, but it is what it is. As a follow-up, we also have the Beast Boss, so we get devastating wound attacks from him into monsters and vehicles. We have a lot of infantry sweeping from 3 units of flash kits, 2 units of 10 plus a unit of 5 to clear screens and engage with your opponent in the shooting phase before you have to send the big bricks in. And then, interestingly, a lot of times we would see Break-A-Boys at this stage to deal with heavy infantry. I guess there might be a push towards more 2-damage weapons now that we're looking at things like 4-wound Victrix Honor Guard being very, very scary. Or even like in the case of that Drukhari list, right? We have mass and Adeptus Mechanicus. We have mass 2-wound heavy infantry, or medium infantry. So the knob squads with power claws are actually pretty well suited there. In this case, we have 1 unit of 10 and 1 unit of 5. That's where the war bosses are going to hop into. And when we're dealing with even wound characteristic enemies, those guys get quite a bit more efficient than we see from units like the Break-A-Boys. Whereas if we have to deal with heavy vehicles or 3-wound heavy infantry, then the Break-A-Boys end up actually coming out on top there. But in this case, where it looks like we're pushing for the knobs, we have a battle wagon in order to deliver some of those guys, plus 2 trucks to deliver the 10-man flash kits, because then they get open topped and they can shoot out the top and blast people. Makes their line of sight much easier from the flash kits when they're using firing decks, because they can draw line of sight from any point on a single truck rather than having to draw line of sight from a unit of 10 guys with 40 mil bases. So that means that you can, they lose their special abilities when they're firing off the top of the truck. It lets them like peek around corners and then blitz all of their shots into a single target to clear those out very efficiently. Double Gretchen as well for utility on top of that. And that's some Orcs, chat. Tom Green is playing Orcs, yeah. maybe he was contractually obligated to play so. It's just unfortunate because he must have had a hard life up to this point, because it is not easy being green. But that's full Welsh breakfast on a wildly aggressive team composition for the 5-player team format. It seems to be like a lot of these armies were like, hey man, I can probably defend because this is a 5-player team format, right? You have less control, even less so than we talked about with the 6-player format. You have less control over exactly what your matchups are. So it seems like most of these armies are like, it's fine, I'll defend and I'll just push. And if I can push and I can clear board space, I can score a high number regardless of what actually happens. And if they do that 5 times, and they expect that they're going to outskill their opponents maybe a little bit too, they can essentially squeak by some wins regardless of their opponent's team composition, right? Because you can ensure that even in your bad matchups, if you're all these like aggressive scoring, heavily scoring defender armies, at any point you can zero out your bad matchups, and if you get any good ones, then you win the game, and that seems like what happened. You can't dodge this much aggression, and you're less likely to have a good answer for half of it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly. And then, like, aggressive armies tend to, while they lose in the late game, right? Like, Orcs will oftentimes be up ahead of their opponent until, like, Battle Round 4, Battle Round 5, and then they lose to, like, Round 5 scoring. That often happens to these aggressive armies, but even in the bad matchups, they get zeroed out or they lose, but they still scored so many points because you have to respect Ghazghkull's threat range. You can't play super aggressive into them. If you overcommit and you give them a good offensive Wog turn and then a second push into you, you lose, right? You lost the game. So you have to wait until they Wog out. As long as you're doing that, they're using their transports and their 5-model units to score, and they're probably running up the scoreboard ahead of you. And the same thing goes for Sisters, right? You don't want to just like aggro directly into Morvenval. She'll kill you if you do. So you have to play kind of cagey. You don't want to give up something for the Immolator to kill top of 1. So you have to play farther back than you normally would. that just allows the sisters to run transports onto all the objectives and run up the score early game. Even if you kill them in the late game and you win by 1, doesn't matter because they basically zeroed out the scores. And that's the case for basically all these lists, which is wild. It's a totally like unhinged team composition to take, but I super duper appreciate it. I think clearly it works, right? These guys went 5-0 and some of their wins were fucking insane. They had a 97 and an 87 and a 78. They did have one tough one around 3, only a 57-point win there, but otherwise they did kind of like blow it out here. So yeah, chat, that's what I wanted to talk about today. That's basically all I have to discuss for this live stream show. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap things up if we don't have anything else that we wanted to discuss. I was kind of hoping that we would get a Titus data sheet that I could talk about. But instead we got I guess we got like a new Crute guy and we got some lore. We got some Titus lore, which I'm not that excited about. So, okay. Oops. We did have this Crute dude though. There's a bird knight for AOS. It's kind of cool. It looks pretty neat. And also this big Crute guy you can use as like your war shaper or something that's going to sit in the back line all day. He looks good. I like him. Neat. But yeah, maybe we'll get Titus later. I guess he's actually like in a book though, right? So I guess we're supposed to wait for that. Anyway, folks, when I'm going to be going home after Everwinter, so I'm going to be heading back probably the Monday after, which means that I don't believe that next week, or it depends entirely on what the scheduling looks like. But there's a strong likelihood that next week will not have a Best Armies in 40K. Or at the very least, it won't have a Best Armies in 40K on Monday morning. So prepare yourself for that. But it is just going to be super tough between a full day of traveling plus pack up from. So because I'm not staying on site at Everwinter, I'm going to have to pack up, then commute. Then I'm going to have to spend the full day Monday traveling back. So I'm not sure I'm going to have the time to do the regular show then. But once next started, probably by next Tuesday, I should be back in the studio essentially. Then tomorrow. So I'll give you guys a redirection for tomorrow's live stream. What we're going to be doing is going through some answers to the Victrix Honor Guard problem, because I think that's a hot button topic right now. So we're gonna talk about armies that are consistently beating Ultramarines. So I'm going to dive into some of the analytics for what is doing that on a practical level at events. And we're gonna deep dive into that stuff, and then obviously this weekend starting Friday, and it's actually gonna be a full day of streaming Friday. The schedule for Everwinter is really weird. It's 3 rounds Friday, then 2 and 2. So it's gonna be a lighter day on Saturday and Sunday, but it's gonna be the full 3 rounds Friday. So if you are someone who's like, oh, I'm always awake on the weekends, I never get to watch 40K coverage, 40K content, we're gonna be up for the full like 12 hours on Friday. So please come hang out with me for that. It's gonna be sweet. So anyway, chat, thanks everyone for watching. Keep it classy, folks. I'll see you in the next one, and have a wonderful rest of your Monday.